Hello everyone, my name is Vincenzo Guido and this is the inaugural episode of Owl Videos. I'm joined here today by Mr. Allocca. Welcome and thank you very much for joining us here today.
Thank you very much, Vincenzo. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. We are going to conduct basically a brief faculty profile to get to know Mr. Allocca better, and so the Regis community has a better idea of who he is, and we obviously extend our open arms to you and welcome you back to Regis. I guess the best way to get started is to tell us a little bit about yourself. What brings you to 55 East 84th Street?
What brings me back? I mean, it's appropriate that you should insert that word there. Again, I just keep thinking about it. It's one of those, I think, beautiful instances of sometimes the way the path of life brings you around full circle. This was a place that I was incredibly happy during my high school years, felt very privileged to have the opportunity to come here. Not the first in my family. I have an older brother, John, who was here 1 year ahead of me, and that was, I have to thank him because, so what's this place he's going? That's why I was curious and interested in the school, and his experience seemed all good, and it was like, I wanted some of that. So definitely was my top choice when I was looking at high school, and just incredibly grateful I was accepted. And as I have said on more occasions than I can count over the many, we don't have to specify a number, it's all a matter of public record, years since then, almost everything positive that I've achieved in my life can be traced some way back to my experiences at Regis. In Chicago, about 5 years, it was in 2010, I had the great good fortune of being given a teaching award for the University of Chicago program that I was in, and it was from student recommendations. They're the ones who select who gets the award that year. And, in being invited to say a few words about it, again, essentially my comments were all in the forms of thank yous, and the thank yous traced to people like Mr. Connolly, who was my history professor at Regis, and I don't need to go into the anecdotes. I'm sure lots of people have their own Mr. Connolly anecdotes, and for all sorts of reasons, but memorable stories about Mr. Connolly that I can share with an audience of people who have never been to Regis or met it, and they will instantly know what this place is about and what the experience is like that will stay with you and inform you for the rest of your life. So I would say when I graduated in 1981, I'll go ahead and say it out loud, I wouldn't have necessarily said one day I'll be back here and be a teacher at Regis, but honestly, in hindsight, it doesn't really surprise me. In many ways, so many of the other things I've done have somehow been leading up to this. So.
Yeah, and I know some of, obviously, your colleagues know you teach theology here at Regis. So what really motivated you to study theology and obviously to come back and teach it?
Well, again, in some ways it's a similar answer. People have often asked me, what did you, what got you interested in studying theology? Or, when I went to college, I went to Columbia University and my major was religion there. And then after I graduated from Columbia, I went to Chicago because I applied to and was accepted to the Divinity School to study the history of religions at the University of Chicago. And that, I guess, all traces back to, bang, once again, influence of Regis. I entered here probably like most people do. I shouldn't say most, but like many of us do, a student who was Catholic, knew something about his religion, had heard something about some other religions, and didn't really spend a great deal of time thinking about it until I was in theology classes here, where I discovered that the subject was just as fascinating as, going to a movie or reading a good novel. Thinking about what my religion is about, and even more importantly, this is where I was introduced to the great pleasures of studying other religions as well. Just became such an endlessly fascinating subject here that I left here thinking this is a really, whenever I had choices for an elective or a topic in a course, frequently it was a religion class, and that essentially spilled right over into my undergraduate experience at Columbia. I did not know going into it what my major was ultimately going to be, but yet again, explored courses in the religion department and found amazing faculty at Columbia University and Barnard College. It's a joint department, teaching classes in religion that were endlessly satisfying to my mind and also just rewarding to me as a whole person, which ultimately led to when I was leaving Columbia or getting ready to graduate, thinking about where I was going to go next. A lot of my faculty saying, you really enjoy this, you're quite good at it, it's something that, is a good fit for you. Have you thought about graduate school? And that was where I was planning to go to graduate school to continue studying religion. That's what got me out to Chicago and ultimately what I went into as a teaching career.
Yeah, and you talk about your interest in theology as well, and I know this is something that we that even you responded briefly to us about. A lot of people feel that in a growingly secular world, I mean, even in an environment like Columbia University, I guess our question to you is, as you see it, I guess as through the eyes of an instructor, what do you think is the future of the study of theology? Do you think it's going to dwindle, or do you think it's going to continue to proliferate, or what are your sort of views on that?
Well, with no disrespect for the question, I don't necessarily agree with the premise. I don't see the world as an increasingly secular place. I understand where that question comes from. In many contexts, I think it all depends on what part of the world you're looking at. There are many contexts where people would think, come on, a serious, grown-up, educated person actually still even bothers to think about religion. That said, that's really a very small portion of, quote, the world, unquote. For the vast majority of the world, and here I'm getting into the territory where people in classes have always heard me say, history teaches me as soon as I say everybody, I'm about to lie. But you come pretty close to saying everybody, all cultures throughout the world have spiritual concerns about a larger world, uninvisible world, a world beyond the end of this life. I think that has been the case for, as long as there have been human beings, and I see no signs whatsoever that that's disappearing. Again, the consequences of religion are not always good things. We've seen all sorts of horrible things that people do in the name of religion, but it serves to underline the point that we're never going to run out of reasons to want to study religion and how it motivates and influences human behavior. So, future of theology, again, specifically speaking, Christian theology, we have a hugely rich tradition that Pope Francis is constantly alluding to that builds on other traditions as well as our own internal Catholic system of teachings that is always moving forward. Plus, as I've said, my own concerns involve a larger history of religions in comparative context, looking at what other people have in their traditions and where there are similarities, but of course also respecting the distinctions, because we're all part of the same race, so human race. And ultimately there are ways we can find reasons for how to go forward together. So.
Sure. And circling back to, obviously the individual classroom settings, you teach a couple of theology classes here at Regis. In your eyes, as a teacher and as an instructor here, what do you think are the biggest challenges, especially inside a Regis classroom? And that said, what are the other things that you especially enjoy about, teaching theology, specifically at Regis to the students that you're teaching now?
Well, so to start with, I think probably one specific way I can answer this is tell a little bit of an embarrassing or a joke at my own expense. When I first got word that there was an opening in the theology department here and applied for the position and interviewed, was excited to know of the possibility and arranged to teach a sample class. And because, as I've already mentioned, I think I've been teaching consistently ever since I was a graduate student, but in a lot of different venues. I taught high school in Chicago. I taught college classes in Chicago. I've taught a lot of continuing ed adult classes. And that, I think, was the problem. I had been so used to teaching because my last recent experience was all adult continuing ed classes at the University of Chicago. They asked me to prepare a lesson and come in and teach it as a sample with some people observing, and gave me one of the freshman classes, which is the same. I have a freshman class right now teaching church history, and they said, this is the general topic that will be covered today. Prepare a lesson, go wherever you want with it. And I walked in, and the first shock that confronted me was, these people are so little. I had just forgotten, what it's like to be a freshman, and what it's like to be the grown-up at the front of a room full of freshmen. That said, this is, no disparagement of the freshmen we've got here. That immediately turned around once I actually was teaching a freshman class to astonishing the level of maturity and engagement you get from people who are in their first year in high school and have no trouble whatsoever putting me on the spot to be sure I can clearly explain transubstantiation because they want to know, okay? And so the level that, all of my students from the freshman church history class to the highest level, the Peace Studies senior elective class, is one of the things that's most enjoyable and rewarding. I mean, on the one hand, it's the greatest challenge of working in a school like this. You cannot let your guard down in the sense of think you can phone in your performance when you walk into a room full of high school students, at least not of the caliber of the students in this place. You know they're going to hold your feet to the fire and expect your best performance all the time, and that's great. It's what I enjoy and what keeps me doing the best job I possibly can. So that said, I just get different pleasures from the different subject matters in each of the classes I teach. People have already asked me several times. One of my sophomores the other day said, what do you like better, teaching these scripture classes to the sophomores or the church history classes to the freshmen? And I thought for a second and I said, depends which day you ask me. Usually it's more a matter of immediate response. Am I enjoying how this class is going right now? Then it's my favorite class. If the next class the next day is going very well, that becomes my favorite class. So.
I'd like to also take notice for a second. I noticed your bald by choice button.
And the lack of hair.
Yes. And a lot of students obviously saw one of their first experiences with you obviously was at the St. Baldrick's event that we've had here at Regis. So we'd like to obviously thank you for showing your solidarity for those that don't have a choice in the matter.
And I want to thank Jack Aiello and everybody else who actually organized the St. Baldrick's event here, which I understand has been going for a couple of years.
Yes.
It's not the first time.
And we wanted to actually ask you a couple of questions about that too. What motivated you, number one, to join and obviously shave your head? And what would you also say to encourage other guys to shave their head in the future?
Well, this is an opportunity for me to give a little bit of a shout out to the school that I worked at in Chicago. To answer the question, what motivated me, I have to thank St. Rita High School, where I taught on the south side of Chicago, starting in 2002. I don't remember exactly. No, I do. 2007 was the first year that a St. Baldrick's event was organized there, and that was the first exposure I ever had to it. I don't remember how long the foundation goes back, but as far as I understand, that was fairly early in the development of it. Someone got word of it and said, why don't we try having an event here at the school? And as soon as I learned about it, I thought, why not? Right? What if you have to lose? Of course, I like to joke that I wear the bald by choice button because someday I'm not going to have that option. I had noticed there's this increasing patch. Maybe someday I'm going to be bald, and I thought, well, what a great opportunity to find out what that's going to be like, all right? And ironically, that was one of the fringe benefits for me anyway. I shaved the head, and I thought, that's not too bad, okay? So I could deal with it, and I like doing it just for a change of pace in terms of a different look. But that's how simple it was. When there were people at the school saying, let's see who's up for this challenge, and I'm like, what's the challenge? Okay, I sacrificed my hair for a little while. It's something that's going to grow back. That's what turns me around to how would I encourage more people to join it next year, is simply reverse the question. What good reason do you have for not joining in an effort like this? If I can be as completely shamelessly manipulative as possible, I've done this a number of times at the previous school where I was involved in this, and it already came up, not surprisingly, as soon as with basically the moment I walked in my first day teaching, I think the next morning I saw an announcement that they were having a St. Baldrick event here, and I'm like, great, glad to have that opportunity to join again. Not surprisingly, no disrespect to the group individually, but I ran into some seniors, and predictably enough, the reason it comes up for seniors, well, prom's coming up, right? And I had some rehearsals of having had that conversation with students at St. Rita before, and I said, sure, I can understand, you all want to look your best. But the way I look at it is, will I look good? Children with cancer. Will I look good? So not to be too mean about it, but my point is, how much of a sacrifice do I have to make to have a little bit of fun and draw a lot of attention? I think that's the critical thing about this, is the attention. Of course, there's the solidarity. When we did this at St. Rita, we had a student there who was being treated for leukemia. So, of course, he had all the usual consequences with the hair loss and everything. It's a great way of showing solidarity, visible sign to people in that situation, you're not alone, we're with you. But also to other people, I'm willing to do this. How much could you cough up to pay me for the privilege of seeing me without my hair? So I find it to be just a wonderful opportunity to sacrifice very little and I think achieve a great deal.